Soft power versus hard power? You're in a meeting. Someone at the table says, I think we should move the launch date back 2 weeks. Another person responds immediately, No, that won't work. We're launching on the 15th. The conversation ends. Now imagine the same meeting, same suggestion, but this time the response is different. That's interesting. What are you seeing that makes you think we need more time? The person explains. There's a back and forth. Other people join in. Eventually, someone says, Okay, let's keep the date for now, but let's check in again on Friday. The outcome might be the same. The date doesn't change. But something else happened. In the first version, the conversation stopped. In the second version, it continued. That difference is not about politeness. It's about power. But not the kind of power most people think of first. What hard power and soft power are. Hard power is the ability to make something happen by force, position, or control. You have hard power when you can say no and that's the end of it. You have hard power when you control resources other people need. You have hard power when you can remove someone from a situation or block them from something they want. A manager who can fire you has hard power. A landlord who can evict you has hard power. A parent who controls where a child goes and what they do has hard power. Hard power doesn't require agreement. It doesn't require the other person to like you or trust you. It works because the person using it controls something the other person can't easily replace. Soft power is the ability to shape what happens by influence, trust, or perception. You have soft power when people listen to you, even though they don't have to. You have soft power when your opinion changes how others see a situation. You have soft power when people want your approval or fear your judgment. A colleague everyone respects has soft power. A friend whose advice people always ask for has soft power. A person who sets the tone in a group without being in charge has soft power. Soft power requires something hard power does not. It requires the other person to care what you think. It requires them to value your opinion or your presence. It works because people choose to give it weight. How the two kinds of power form. Hard power usually comes from structure. It comes from roles, rules, ownership, or legal standing. You don't earn it through interaction. You receive it when you take a job, sign a lease, or enter a relationship with built-in imbalance. A teacher has hard power over a student because the school system gives it to them. The student cannot simply leave. The student cannot ignore assignments without consequences. The teacher controls grades, and grades affect the student's future. The teacher did not create this power. It was already there. Soft power forms differently. It builds through repeated interactions. It grows when someone is consistently right, consistently calm, consistently fair, or consistently useful. It also grows when someone is feared, but not because they can fire you. They're feared because they can change how others see you. Imagine a team where one person always has good ideas. Over time, people start looking at that person when a question comes up. They wait to hear what that person thinks before they commit to a direction. That person hasn't been promoted. They don't control the budget, but they have influence. That's soft power. Now imagine a different person on the same team. This person doesn't have the best ideas, but they're close to the boss. When they speak, people listen carefully. Not because the ideas are strong, because dismissing this person might get back to someone who does have hard power. That's also soft power, but it's a different kind. It's borrowed. It depends on proximity to hard power. If that connection breaks, the soft power disappears. How hard power changes communication. When someone has hard power over you, you edit yourself. You think about what you're going to say before you say it. You consider how it will land. You run through possible responses in your head. This happens even when the person with power is kind, even when they've never punished you. The gap in consequence is always there. A worker emails their boss with a question. They read the email 3 times before sending it. They take out the part that sounds too casual. They add a line thanking the boss for their time. They check the tone. The boss replies in 2 sentences. No greeting, no closing, just the answer. This is normal. The boss is not being rude. The worker is not being weak. They're both responding to the structure they're in. The worker has more to lose. A misunderstood tone could create tension. Tension could lead to fewer opportunities. Fewer opportunities could mean a worse review. The chain of consequences is long, and the worker can see it. The boss does not have the same chain. A short reply does not cost them anything. The worker will not remember it as an offense. The worker will just move on. This is how hard power shapes speed and care. The person with less power moves slower and thinks harder. The person with more power moves faster and thinks less. How soft power changes communication. Soft power works differently. It doesn't create fear of punishment. It creates fear of losing respect or position in the group. You're in a conversation with someone everyone trusts. You disagree with something they said. You could speak up, but you hesitate. You're not worried they'll fire you. You're worried they'll dismiss your point in a way that makes you look uninformed. You're worried other people will side with them. You're worried you'll lose credibility. So you soften your disagreement. You say, "That's a good point, but I wonder if," instead of, "I don't think that's right." You're managing their perception of you. You're managing the group's perception of you. That's what soft power does. It makes people manage perception. Here's another version. You're talking to someone no one respects. They say something you disagree with. You respond immediately. You don't soften it. You might even be blunt. Why? Because there's no social cost. Disagreeing with this person does not hurt your standing. It might even help it. The exact same disagreement gets handled 2 completely different ways, depending on who has soft power in the room. How people confuse behavior with personality. People often mistake the effects of power for personality traits. A manager is direct and confident in meetings. People say, "She's just naturally assertive." But watch what happens when that same manager is in a room with executives. She hesitates more. She listens longer before speaking. She's more careful with her word choice. Her personality didn't change. The power structure changed. A student is quiet in class. Teachers say he's shy. But outside of class with friends, that same student talks constantly. He makes jokes. He interrupts people. He's loud. He's not shy. He's responding to the gap in power between himself and the teacher. This confusion happens all the time. People see someone acting cautious and think that's who they are. But caution is often just a response to risk. When the risk is gone, the caution disappears. The same is true on the other side. People see someone acting confident and think that's their nature. But confidence is easier when you have nothing to lose or when others depend on you more than you depend on them. Personality exists, but power shapes how personality shows up, and people constantly confuse the two. How hard power can look like soft power. Sometimes hard power disguises itself. It looks collaborative. It looks like influence, but underneath the structure is still there. A boss says, "I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on this." People share ideas. The boss listens, nods, asks questions. Then the boss says, "Great. I think we should go with option 2." Option 2 was not the most popular choice, but it's what happens. The boss created the feeling of input. People felt heard. But the decision was always going to be the boss's. The conversation was not a negotiation. It was a performance of openness. This is common. People with hard power often soften its appearance. They do this for good reasons. They want buy-in. They want people to feel valued. They don't want to be seen as dictators. But the structure has not changed. If everyone in the room had disagreed with option 2, it still would have happened. That's hard power. The confusion comes when people think they had influence. They think their input mattered. Sometimes it does, but often it only matters within boundaries the person with hard power has already set. How soft power can feel heavier than hard power. Hard power is visible. You know when someone can fire you. You know when someone controls your grade. You know when someone owns the building you live in. Soft power is harder to see. And because it's harder to see, it can be harder to resist. Imagine you're in a friend group. One person is the center. Not because they're in charge, but because they set the tone. When they're excited about something, everyone gets excited. When they're annoyed, everyone notices. You suggest a plan. They don't say no. They just don't respond with energy. They say, "Yeah, maybe." And the conversation moves on. You feel it. Your idea died, but no one rejected it outly. There was no confrontation. There was just a lack of enthusiasm from the person whose enthusiasm matters most. This happens at work too. You propose something in a meeting. The person everyone respects stays quiet. They don't argue against it. They just don't support it. Later, your proposal goes nowhere. You can't point to what went wrong. There was no veto. There was no argument. There was just silence from the person whose support you needed. This is why soft power can feel worse than hard power. Hard power is clear. You can prepare for it. You can see it coming. Soft power is quiet. It works through absence, through timing, through what doesn't get said. How both kinds of power combine. Most situations involve both kinds of power at once, and the two kinds affect each other. A manager has hard power. They control schedules and assignments, but if no one on the team respects them, their hard power becomes harder to use. They have to give more orders. They have to follow up more. They have to push harder to get the same results. Now imagine a different manager. Same role. Same formal authority. But this manager has soft power too. The team trusts them. When this manager asks for something, people do it without being reminded. The manager rarely has to use their hard power because their soft power makes things move. The formal authority is the same, but the effort required is completely different. This works in reverse too. Soft power gets stronger when it's close to hard power. You're influential in a group. People listen to you. Then you get promoted. Suddenly, your opinion carries even more weight. Not because you got smarter, because now you also have formal authority. People start agreeing with you faster. They challenge you less. Your soft power grows because it's now backed by hard power. This is why people often say power corrupts. It's not just that people with power start behaving badly, it's that people around them start behaving differently. They agree more. They push back less. They laugh at jokes that aren't funny. And the person with power starts to believe their ideas are better than they are. The soft power inflates, and it becomes harder to tell what's real. How communication breaks down. When power is unclear. When power is clear, communication is easier. Not more fair, but easier. People know what they can and cannot say. They know who makes decisions. They know what happens if they push too hard. When power is unclear, everything gets harder. Imagine a meeting where no one is officially in charge. Someone suggests an idea. Another person dismisses it quickly. The first person doesn't know how to respond. Are they allowed to push back? Will it look bad? Who decides what happens next? The conversation stalls. People look around. Everyone is trying to figure out the same thing. Who has the authority here? Whose opinion matters most? This happens in friendships too. Two people are close. Neither one is in charge. But over time, one person's preferences start to dominate. Where they eat, what they do, when they meet. The other person notices but doesn't say anything. Why? Because the power is unclear. They don't know if they're allowed to push back. They don't know if it will create conflict. So they stay quiet. And the imbalance grows. Unclear power creates hesitation. People spend more energy trying to read the room than actually communicating. And because everyone is hesitating, nothing gets resolved. How hard power breaks without consequence. Hard power seems permanent, but it's fragile in a specific way. It only works if the consequences still matter. A boss has authority over a worker. The worker needs the job. The boss can threaten to fire them, cut their hours, or give them worse assignments. The worker complies. Then the worker gets another job offer. Suddenly the power shifts. The boss can still make threats, but the threats don't land the same way. The worker has an exit. The hard power is still technically there, but it stopped working. This is why people with hard power often don't realize they've lost it until it's too late. The structure looks the same. The titles haven't changed, but the dependence is gone. And without dependence, hard power dissolves. The same thing happens in relationships. One person controls money or housing. The other person has nowhere to go. That control creates compliance. But the moment the dependent person has another option, the power disappears. The person who had control often reacts with confusion or anger. They still think the power is there, but it's not. It was never about them. It was about the other person's lack of options. How soft power breaks without notice. Soft power breaks differently. It doesn't disappear because of options. It disappears because of trust. You respect someone. You listen to their advice. You value their opinion. Then you notice they were wrong about something important. You start to question other things they've said. You listen less carefully. You check their claims. They haven't changed, but your perception of them has. And because soft power lives in perception, it's already fading. This is why soft power requires maintenance. You can't build it once and assume it lasts. Every interaction either adds to it or takes from it. A person who is respected can lose that respect in a single moment. One dismissive comment, one bad decision, one broken confidence. The soft power they spent years building can collapse in a day. Hard power doesn't work that way. A bad boss is still your boss. A landlord who makes mistakes still owns the building. The structure holds them in place. But soft power has no structure. It's only held by what people believe about you. And belief is fragile. How people try to build the wrong kind of power. People often try to build hard power when they need soft power. Or they try to build soft power when the situation requires hard power. Someone wants influence at work. They think the answer is to get promoted. They push for a title change, a bigger role, more formal authority. They get it, and nothing changes. People still don't listen to them. Meetings still go the same way. The title didn't solve the problem, because the problem was not about structure. It was about respect. They needed soft power. But they tried to build hard power instead. The reverse happens too. Someone has formal authority but no respect. They try to build soft power by being liked. They avoid hard decisions. They let things slide. They try to be everyone's friend. But the role requires hard power. It requires someone to make unpopular calls, to set boundaries, to say no. And by avoiding that, they lose both kinds of power. The team doesn't respect them, and they stop using the authority they actually have. Knowing which kind of power you need matters. And most people guess wrong. How power becomes invisible to the person who has it. People with power stop noticing it. They think the way people treat them is just normal. They think people agree with them because their ideas are good. They think people laugh because they're funny. Sometimes that's true, but often it's not. A manager tells a joke in a meeting. Everyone laughs. The manager thinks, I'm funny. Later, the same manager tells the same joke to a friend. The friend doesn't laugh. The manager is confused. That joke worked before. It worked because of power, not because of humor. This happens with ideas too. A senior person shares a thought. Everyone nods. That's a great point. Later, a junior person shares the same thought. People move on. No one comments. The senior person does not see this. They only see their own experience. They think people engage with them because of the quality of their contributions. They don't realize people engage because of their position. Over time, this creates a distorted sense of self. The person with power starts to believe they're smarter, funnier, and more insightful than they are. Because everyone around them is reacting to the power, not the person. This is one of the most dangerous effects of power. It makes you blind to yourself. How people without power see everything. People with less power notice everything. They have to. They notice when someone's tone shifts. They notice when a conversation gets quiet. They notice who gets called on in meetings and who gets ignored. They notice whose ideas get picked up and whose get dropped. They're reading the room constantly, because small changes in tone or attention can mean large changes in outcome. A worker notices their boss seems frustrated. They adjust. They're more careful in emails. They avoid asking for things. They wait for a better moment. The boss does not notice their own mood. They're just having a normal day. but the worker is managing around something the boss doesn't even see. This creates a strange imbalance in awareness. The person with less power understands the dynamic better than the person with more power. They see the whole picture. The person with power only sees their side. This is why people are often surprised when someone quits or pushes back. "I didn't see this coming." Of course they didn't. They weren't watching. They didn't have to. How language changes depending on who speaks first. In any conversation, the person who speaks first sets the frame, but power decides whether that frame holds. You're in a meeting. A junior person suggests an idea. They frame it carefully. "I was thinking we might consider possibly trying this approach if it makes sense." The suggestion is tentative, full of qualifiers. The person is managing risk. Now imagine a senior person suggests the same idea. "We should do this." No qualifiers, no hedging, just a statement. The idea is the same, but the certainty is different. And the certainty comes from power, not from the strength of the idea. Here's what happens next. When the junior person suggests it, people ask questions. "Have you thought about this risk? What about this other option?" When the senior person suggests it, people add to it. "That's smart. We could also do this." The junior person's idea gets tested. The senior person's idea gets built on. Same idea, different power, different outcome. How silence means different things depending on power. Silence is not neutral. It carries different meanings depending on who stays quiet and when. A manager asks a question in a meeting. No one answers right away. The silence feels awkward. People look down. Someone finally says something just to fill the space. That silence meant hesitation, uncertainty, possibly fear. Now imagine a senior leader asks a question and pauses. No one jumps in. The silence feels fine. People are thinking. The leader is giving them space. Same silence, different power, different feeling. When someone with power stays silent, it can feel like strategy, like they're waiting to see what others say first. When someone without power stays silent, it looks like they have nothing to contribute. This is why junior people often feel pressure to speak even when they don't have something to say. Silence makes them invisible. But when senior people stay silent, it makes them look thoughtful. The silence is identical, but the interpretation depends entirely on power. How people use soft power to resist hard power. Soft power is one of the few tools people have when they can't challenge hard power directly. A worker can't tell their boss no, but they can be slow. They can misunderstand instructions. They can do exactly what was asked, and nothing more. They can follow the rules so carefully that the work becomes inefficient. This is passive resistance. It uses compliance as a weapon. The worker looks cooperative, but the outcome is still a form of refusal. The same thing happens in families. A teenager can't leave, but they can be silent. They can stay in their room. They can give one-word answers. They can technically obey while making it clear they don't agree. This is soft power pushing back against hard power. It doesn't win directly, but it makes the use of hard power more costly. It forces the person with authority to spend more energy to get the same result. Over time, this kind of resistance wears people down. The person with hard power starts to avoid conflict. They stop asking for certain things. They let small refusals slide. And slowly the power shifts. not in structure, but in practice. How both kinds of power require belief. Hard power seems like it works automatically, but it doesn't. It requires the other person to believe the consequences are real. A boss threatens to fire someone. The threat only works if the worker believes it will happen. If the worker thinks the boss is bluffing, the threat has no weight. A landlord says they'll evict someone. The threat only works if the tenant believes the landlord will follow through and that they can't fight it. The structure gives power, but belief activates it. Soft power is even more dependent on belief. It only exists because people believe someone's opinion matters. The moment that belief fades, the soft power is gone. This is why both kinds of power can collapse suddenly. A worker calls a bluff. The boss does nothing. Hard power breaks. A respected person gets caught in a lie. No one trusts them anymore. Soft power breaks. Power is not just about structure or influence. It's about whether people believe it's real. And belief can vanish in a moment. How power shapes what gets remembered. People remember interactions differently depending on power. A boss gives feedback. The worker remembers every word. They think about it for days. They adjust their behavior. They mention it to friends. The boss forgets the conversation by the next day. It was routine, just part of the job. Same interaction, completely different weight. This happens in friendships too. One person cancels plans, the other person remembers it for months. They always do this. The person who canceled doesn't remember. It wasn't important to them. The person with less power holds on to details. The person with more power lets them go. Not because one person is more considerate, because the stakes are different. When you have more to lose, you remember more. When you have less to lose, you move on faster. Closing reflection. Power is not just something a few people have. It's in every conversation, every email, every decision about who speaks first and who waits. Most people move through the day without naming it. They just feel it. The extra thought before sending a message. The careful phrasing in a meeting. The silence when someone else is talking. You've been on both sides. You've had moments where you could say anything and it would be fine. And you've had moments where every word felt like it mattered too much. That difference is power. Not loudness, not confidence. Just the gap between what you can afford to lose and what the other person can afford to lose. Once you see it, you notice it everywhere. In how long someone takes to reply. In who gets interrupted and who doesn't. In whose ideas get remembered and whose get forgotten by the end of the meeting. It doesn't make every interaction sinister, but it does make them clearer. People are not just being themselves. They're responding to the structure they're in, and that structure is almost always about power. Hard or soft, visible or hidden, but always there.